Hi friends, this is Kunal Bothra. I hope all of you guys are doing absolutely fine and great. I'm sure I know the markets are not doing anything which is very great, exciting or something to be chirpy about. But then the observations today which I am bringing about could probably be one of the better observations which we have seen over the last many months on the indices. I call it that why is the 16,500 mark on the Nifty 50 the backbone of this market. Now we all know that what is the meaning of backbone and why backbones are significant for the structure of human body. In a similar manner, in a similar vein, why the 16,500 mark is a very important, a very crucial, and maybe I'll call it as a significant level for the indices. So I'll try and bring you that technical observation, showcasing on charts what study which we have established on the index, and why that study is very important, something which has worked out for not the last 3 months, not the last 6 months, not the last 2 years, but the last 2.5 decades on the Nifty. That whenever this observation has occurred, it has resulted into something which we call it as a later half of a trend. So we'll decipher, we'll discuss all of that in this video. So be rest assured, sit back, enjoy till the end, and I'm sure you would be quite amazed with the observation. Uh, Before we start off, again, a request to all of you guys who are logging on for the first time to our YouTube channel. Uh, do subscribe, do hit the notification button, do like the channel as well, and ensure that you share the video. It's going to be a phenomenal observation. We've seen the track record of over the last many months as well, that we started to go into the short angle of the Nifty. On the short side, we started and slowly getting into a zone where we first preempted. I remember doing this Facebook live, I think on in December somewhere, when the index had gone to a rally just around that 18,500 zone. तो वहां पे क्वेश्चंस आ रहे थे कि क्या इंडेक्स 19,000 टच करेगा. My opinion, my Facebook live, in my Facebook live that time I had mentioned very specifically that the index should hit back to at least 17,400 500 before there is any major mean reversion which could get completed. We managed to hit that 17,400 500 levels. I think it's somewhere in the month of end of December or mid of January, and from there the index bounced back again to 18,000 levels. And today we are at a point where the index has officially corrected 10%. So if you do the math, 18,887 ka high tha, and we officially corrected 10% on the index today, where the Nifty is broken below the 17,000 mark. But the importance of this video is that why do we call 16,500 as a backbone. तो सबसे पहला क्वेश्चन जो आपके दिमाग में आएगा कि भाई why 18,000 was not a support or a backbone, why 17,500 was not a backbone, and why 18,000 or rather 16,500 is the backbone of the structure. So I'm sure that that level, and how do we derive that level, how do we arrive to that level would probably question you, or keep that question in your mind. So we'll answer that question as well, why the 16,500 mark is very important. But I would request all of you to watch the entire video, because at the end is where we would reveal the observation why this level is so significant for the index. Again, just to begin, let's create a setup of what has happened for the index in the last 3-4 months. Now we all know where 2022 was. We've gone through a big, I would say, change and shift of events across the globe. So from a narrative where it was all about quantitative easing and liquidity and money being pumped into the certain geographies across the globe, the narrative shifted towards war-like scenario between Russia, Ukraine, and there was anticipation that maybe there could be a significant jump up. Crude went up to 130 $39 per barrel on the Brent, and now we are at a point where the crude is corrected towards, I think, 78 or $79 is the last I had seen on crude. So there has been lot which has happened over the last 1.5 odd years for the global economies as well as for our markets. Interestingly, surprisingly, I would say, as well as interestingly, Nifty had managed to outperform and stay resilient for most part of 2022. It is just in the last 3-4 months from the December highs where the index started to correct. Now, if you do a very simple math, the December first week highs, which the Nifty made, was 18,887.6. From there, we corrected 10% so far, as I said, and we've fallen below the 17,000 mark. So simple math अगर हम करेंगे तो some 16,998 point something is the 10% breakdown from this 18,887 mark on the Nifty. And today the Nifty managed to briefly fall below that 17,000 levels. And of course, now we are into a process of a bounce. Now, if you have followed or do follow my Twitter handles as well as many of the social media platforms, we did indicate today in the, I think the mid session somewhere, that the markets are going into a bounce and the likelihood of becoming or turning into a buyer is significantly better as an advantage. We work out with probabilities and we try to identify zones of contra behavior, and that's what we did 3-4 days back when we identified a sell on the PSU banks. We identified a sell on the PSC index, which were actually doing exceptionally well. तो बोलते ना, पीक ऑफ मोमेंटम पे हमने सेल दिया और पीक ऑफ बेरिशनेस पे हमने आज आके बोल्डली we gave a buy call on the bank Nifty specifically, where we mentioned that we are at a point of a strong relief rally. So if you've missed out that part, I'll just reiterate back again. First, we'll look out for the trend. Now, this is the trends from December 2022. I again, सबसे पहला important होता है, because when you're trying to do any study, you always have to observe that how the trends have shaped up. Last 3 से 4 महीने का trend में I call it as a very structured correction. Now, the word structured is very, very significant and important to understand. Structured मतलब क्या होता है? जब कोई asset class, कोई index एक steady correction phase में जाता है, which means it's bound between two lines. As you can see, that the upper end of a resistance line, which started off from end of November, start of December 2022, and the lower end of the trend line. So every time the index falls closer to the support trend line or at that support trend line, there is a sudden halt of correction and the index goes into a bounce. And on the upside, when the index touches the resistance line, you see a sudden arrest of the rally, sudden stopping of the rally, and the index goes into a corrective mode. I call it as a structured correction because जब तक एक correction दो पैरेलल चैनल्स के बीच में या एक चैनल या दो पैरेलल ट्रेंड लाइंस के बीच में अगर एक करेक्शन होती है, आई कॉल इट एज स्ट्रक्चर्ड बिकॉज इट्स अ वेरी स्लो, स्मूथ एंड इमर्जिंग ट्रेंड फॉर द इंडेक्स. तो अगर हम देख रहे हैं कि 10% का करेक्शन होने के लिए हमें ऑलमोस्ट 3.5 to 4 months लग गया from the December high. So that itself tells you an indication that it's a very slow, labored move. Now intensify कब होता है ये correction या ये trend कब intensify होगा? If we break below the lower end of this support trend line. So if we break below the 16,800 odd mark, then there could be a significant chance that this structured correction would change its behavior. So I hope you are trying to follow the words. हर ट्रेंड की बिहेवियर और कैरेक्टरिस्टिक समझना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी होता है. इनफैक्ट दैट्स व्हाट टेक्निकल एनालिस्ट शुड and they typically do. They tend to identify the behavior points, the classical behavior points of the previous trend or of an ongoing trend. And जब वो हम वो classical behavior pattern समझ जाते हैं, उसके बाद में हम assess करते हैं कि whether the support or the resistance or that pattern will hold or not. Now, this is the second chart. Again, we flagged this off almost a couple of weeks back, where we mentioned that there has been a major trend indicator. Now, this is an indicator which I developed long back, I think many years ago, a classical indicator which gives us phenomenal touch points of a start of a trend. By trend, I mean, a trend which lasts for at least 500 points and on an average 1000 to 1500 points का एक trend last करता है indices में. So whether it's 2020 start, whether it's 2021 top, whether it's 2022 bottoms in the month of September, or in the month of June, July, we've managed to capture major parts of the big trend which have emerged. Now, this trend indicator is completely different than the so-called traditional indicators because जो traditional indicators होते हैं trend के, उनमें एक typical feature होता है that to ride a trend, जब आप एक 2000 पॉइंट का ट्रेंड राइड करते हो तो वो सबसे पहले तो आपको क्या करेगा कि सबसे पहले आपको एंटर लेट करवाएगा, आपको 500 से 800 पॉइंट लेट एंटर करवाएगा ट्रेंड में। और जो सेकंड बात होती है कि जब ट्रेंड टॉप आउट हो जाता है और उसके बाद में और 500 से 700 पॉइंट ड्रॉप डाउन हो जाता है, उसके बाद हमें एग्जिट सिग्नल आता है। तो अगर 2000 पॉइंट की एक रैली आती है तो जो टिपिकल ट्रेंड, जो कन्वेंशनल ट्रेंड इंडिकेटर्स होते हैं, वहां पे आप कैप्चर कर पाते हो कितना, 800 900 1000 पॉइंट कैप्चर कर पाते हो। बाकी के 500 500 पॉइंट लिटरली इट्स लाइक द वेस्टेज व्हिच हैपेंस, late entry and late exit. But this trend indicator which we've developed gives us entries which are much earlier and exit which are much quicker. So ये सबसे बड़ा बेनिफिट है। तो इसमें जो प्रोपेंसिटी है, जो प्रोबेबिलिटी है जिसमें हम बड़ा ट्रेंड्स कैप्चर कर सकते हैं, वो सिग्निफिकेंटली हाई हो जाते हैं। Now, why am I bringing this chart over here? I am bringing this chart because the observation is the zone of whipsaws. So as you can see on the chart, I have marked a zone of whipsaw on the indicator. Now this is very rare. एक ट्रेंड इंडिकेटर क्या बिहेवियर क्या होता है, वो ट्रेंड इंडिकेट करता है, बट सडनली व्हेन देयर इज नो ट्रेंड द इंडिकेटर गोज इनटू अ whipsaw mode. In technical terms we say that generally 3 whipsaws or at max 4 whipsaws when they happen consecutively, it's generally an indication that a new trend would emerge. अब आप समझ सकते हो कि लास्ट 1 या 2 मंथ्स में जब इतने ज्यादा अप डाउन मूवमेंट हो रहे थे, अगर हम लिटरली 17,500 पे एक फ्लैट लाइन ड्रॉ करें तो हम देखेंगे 18,000 और 17,000, 18,000 17,000, ये रेंज के बीच में इंडेक्स मूव कर रहा था। और दैट्स द वन ऑफ द रीजंस व्हाई द इंडिकेटर, द ट्रेंड इंडिकेटर इज नॉट शोइंग एनी ट्रेंड, बट because there has been a significant whipsaw on the trend indicator, our belief is that we are coming very close towards a starting point of a new trend. So whether it's a breakdown or a breakout, of course we'll try and decipher that once the key significant levels are broken out, whether it's upside or the downside. So that I'll showcase you in the second half of the presentation. But this is what you need to understand, that in the last 1 or 2 months even the trend indicators have given a failure signal and repetitive failure signal. This generally is a precursor that एक जो whipsaw trend था, जो हम कहते हैं ना कि weaker hands both on the long side and the short side, they were cut out. Now a new trend is just about on the verge of beginning. So as I said, what we ideally do is we look out for every trend, whether it's an upward trend, whether it's a downward trend, and we try to identify the behavioral pattern and the characteristics. So हर ट्रेंड की एक बिहेवियर होती है, जैसे हम कहते हैं ना कि for every trend there is a atomic structure, there is an atomic trend which happens, and if you try and identify the structure, the core DNA of that pattern or of that trend, you've actually deciphered that how the trend is going to shape up, वो ट्रेंड कितना लास्ट कर सकता है। So for example there are many guys who follow Elliott waves and Fibonacci. They've seen that when a trend emerges, if after a rally the correction stops at say 23.6%, the next rally the second correction stops at 38% retracement, 50% retracement, they say it's a very structured rally. तो जनरली जो लास्ट करेक्शन आता है वो 61.8% करेक्शन होगा, उसके बाद में वापस एक रैली आती है, तो वो हम एंटिसिपेट करना चालू कर लेते हैं बेस्ड ऑन हाउ द रिसेंट ट्रेंड्स हैव शेप्ड अप. नाउ वी ऑल नो दैट एवरी ट्रेंड इज डिफरेंट देन द प्रीवियस ट्रेंड्स व्हिच हैव इमर्ज्ड. दैट्स व्हाई a lot of study emphasis goes into identification of the existing trend. Now one of the patterns which we today gave it on our free Telegram channel as well is based on this behavioral pattern, that why on the very short term charts, extremely short term charts, we are indicative that the index is getting into a process of bounce, specifically on the Bank Nifty. Now this was the charts which we had published on a free Telegram channel, and very, very important, because the observation here is that in this last 4 months, 3.5 months of correction on the index, if there is one pattern which has been sticking to the Bank Nifty or the indices, is that जब भी एक कोई major gap close होता है, उसके बाद में इंडेक्स रैली करता है और रैली करते ही वो इंडेक्स अगर आप देखोगे वहां से बाउंस करता है, बाउंस करके सेकंड लेग ऑफ करेक्शन आता है. सो इवन इफ यू लुक एट द गैप वन पार्ट where the bank nifty topped out at 44,000 mark, we fell to 42,000 levels, closed the first major gap. From there we bounced up higher, 43,500, and then we started to get into a time wise correction first and then a price wise correction. The approach towards gap 2 was at a point when you know that the news flow from the Adani group of stocks suddenly impacted and jolted the markets. तो यहाँ पे आप देख रहे हो कि from 42,500 levels approximately the bank nifty fell sharply towards sub 40,000 mark. तो एक sharp correction आया, gap 2 close हो गया. अगर आप देख रहे हो तो gap 2 के आसपास suddenly the intensity of selling reduces. तो gap 2 जैसे ही close हुआ suddenly there have been counter rally days. तो उसके पहले तो क्या हो रहा था, फ्री फ्लोइंग करेक्शंस हो रहे थे और सडनली काउंटर रैली डेज आ गए. काउंटर रैली मतलब बुल्स ने पहली बार अटेम्प्ट किया उस लेवल को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए, है ना. और जैसे ही वो लेवल्स प्रोटेक्ट हो गए, बजट जैसा बड़ा इवेंट उस लेवल्स के आसपास से गुजर के चला गया, उसके बाद हमने देखा कि इंडेक्स में एक बहुत क्लासिकल बाउंस आया. सो फ्रॉम 40,000 ऑड लेवल्स द इंडेक्स रैली टुवर्ड्स 41,700 और 800. Okay, then the second leg of correction happened, and now today we have hit the third gap on the index. So as you can see that the gap 3 has closed partially. 39,150 के आसपास का ये आई थिंक आज का लो था. हमने मोटा मोटा उस गैप को क्लोज कर दिया है partially आज, which means that if we go by the previous two observations, the so-called behavior, the trend, behavior of this trend, then the last two gaps पे fall arrest हुआ, index ने bounce किया, which means this time around also the pattern has a higher probability of being repeated, and that's why from here we can expect a decent bounce. And this was exactly the charts which we published today on our free Telegram channel as well as on our Twitter platform. So if you are not a part of our free Telegram channels, I would request you all to join the channel immediately, because this is a live market stuff which we try and give our observations on various asset class, some interesting systems, as well as on the indices, as well as some key levels on a regular basis. So just go onto our Telegram, search Kunal Bothra Club and be a part of it. Free Telegram group. I'm sure you would love the kind of observations and the materials as well as the charts which we showcase in this Telegram group. Now coming to the core question, why we are over here today, that why is that 16,500 level? तो हमने तो recent structure तो identify कर लिया कि markets down trend में है, corrections है, corrections halt होने के chances ज़्यादा है, rally होने के chances ज़्यादा है. But what happens if in case, say by end of the month of March or say by the month of April, or if there is any negative news flow for the globe, why 16,500 levels is very, very important. So again, this reading is based on the same pattern, like a behavioral pattern which has played out very well, not just in the last 3-4 months, but over the last 2.5 decades on the index. And for that behavioral pattern, we now look at the charts for Nifty 50 and we map a very simple, profound and classical indicator, that's the Ichimoku pattern indicator. So again, just to put it very, very simply, मैंने बाकी सारी lines को hide कर लिया है because यहाँ पे मुझे सिर्फ दो ही pattern से important है. पहला है brown line, as you can see, Chikou span, which is a part of the Ichimoku indicator, and the second is the Ichimoku cloud. As you can see, those cloud shaped figures जहाँ पे आपका prices, they enter into the cloud and then come back again. So all we have done is that looked at the charts for the Nifty 50 and how the behavior is with respect to the Ichimoku cloud. Of course, this is the weekly charts on Nifty 50. So the observation goes as such that whenever the Chikou span, which is the brown line, falls below the Ichimoku clouds, मैंने आपको वो red design से मैंने mark किया है that whenever the brown line, that's a Chikou span, falls below the Ichimoku cloud, it results into a significant correction on the index. Now the Most recent one was seen in 2020, the year 2020, where the index fell off. The point at which the Chico span triggered a correction was at 10,800. वहां से we know what happened during the COVID sell-off, and the Nifty fell to as much as 7,550 approximately. So a sharp correction of more than 30% on the Nifty post this observation. But is this one-off observation? No, not at all. 2015 में एक similar observation आया था जब Chico span had broken below this crucial zone of Ichimoku cloud, and that resulted into another 8.5% correction further on the Nifty. Before the Nifty settled off, the correction stopped, halted, and the markets formed a base for itself. 2011, very similar observation. The index was, as it is going through a corrective phase, the Chico span fell below the Ichimoku cloud, and you saw further correction of 10% on the index. So from 5,050, which was the breakdown point of Chico span, on weekly closing basis, the index fell by another 10% to almost 4,500 levels. 2008, now we don't want to remember 2008, of course, but we know that what happened in 2008 was one of the greatest financial crises the world had seen, a very strong and a deep recessionary period for the global market, specifically for the US indices. And in that scenario, the Nifty fell from 4,280, which was the point where the Chico span broke below the Ichimoku cloud on weekly closing basis, and from there the index fell by a staggering, a stunning, and I would say a classic 47% correction from that 4280 mark on the Nifty. I think it fell to as much as 2250 approximately on the Nifty. So आप गेज कर सकते हो कि कितना बड़ा करेक्शन हुआ था वो टाइम पीरियड में. Again, इसके पहले कोई ऑब्जर्वेशन है? Of course, there are two more observations which are still there. I think that slide is not visible, but you can go back to the charts. You can map this Ichimoku pattern, and two observations which come back again. One was in 2000. The recent one, the prior one was in 2000, 2001, where the Nifty had again fallen by I think an intensity of more than 10 to 15% correction. And prior to that was in the year 1998, where the index had again fallen by a similar observation, where the Chico span had broken below the classical Ichimoku cloud, and that led to another leg of correction. So where does this bring us to an observation? This brings us to a point where for the current structure of Nifty, the lower end of the of the Ichimoku cloud is around the 16,500 mark. So, which means if the brown line, which is the Chico span, if it breaks below the Ichimoku cloud on weekly closing basis, you now know what is the high probability trade. Now, I don't need to explicitly say it again, because I have just mentioned it to you that over the last 2.5 decades, there have been 6 such occurrences, and on all of those 6 occurrences, the charts indicate of a continuation sell-off further on the indices. So, which means the 16,500 mark forms the backbone of this structure of the market trend. So, not 18,000, not 17,500, not 17,000, but hopefully, rather, I would say, if in case we fall below the 16,500 mark, and if that coincides with the Ichimoku cloud support, that forms the crucial zone backbone for the index. Now, you know, I've been bearish on the indices over the last couple of months, but I hope that something like this actually doesn't happen. And let's hope that the markets protect the 16,500 mark and we don't break below those levels, because history suggests that if the index falls below this weekly Ichimoku cloud observation on the Nifty50, things have not ended on a pleasant note for the indices. So this is more like an observation which you should keep at your back of your mind, because you always have to remember that when the markets goes into a structural correction And when that structural correction goes into a sharp sell-off, you need to know what points you need to exit your positions or start to get more protected towards your positions in case if you're still holding on to the longs, or in case if the sell-off is very very sudden. Because generally क्या होता है कि जब एक मेजर लेवल टूटता है, बाउंस आता है, तो थोड़ी सी एक बोलते ना कि इंटेंसिटी बढ़ जाती है जहां पे हम लॉन्ग पोजीशंस को और कैरी कर सके. बट हमेशा ऑब्जर्व करना पड़ता है कि ये सारे जो इंपॉर्टेंट टेक्निकल पैरामीटर्स है व्हिच वी अगेन डिराइव दिस ऑब्जेक्टिवली holds significance as a reading for the indices. So that's why the 16,500 mark is a possible inflection point, a point where major trends could start to begin on the indices. And on an average, we've seen that the correction has been 10% for the Nifty. So as I said, the last six observations, 2020, 2015, 11, 2008, 2097, 97, 98, the year 1997, 1998, all of these points is where the index had fallen below, the Chico span had fallen below the Ichimoku cloud, and you've seen the intensity of correction which had happened in that time era as well. So what's the strike rate of this observation? Not 20, not 30, not 50, not 50, not 60, not 70. The strike rate over the last six observations panned over the last 2.5 decades has been 100%, which means that this is an indicator which becomes a high probability trend identification indicator for the Nifty this time around as well. And that's why I thought of bringing out this classical YouTube video to try and showcase why this observation in the level is significant enough. So on an average, just to summarize, that the index has fallen by at least 10%. In many cases, the correction has been 30% to 47%. That of course depends on how significant the phase of recession or the phase of corrections have been. 2000, 2020, 2008 have been two such periods where the corrections have been very sharp and very intense. Let us hope that we don't see such kind of phase of correction. And I'm happy that I don't have to do an addendum video saying that the Nifty is broken below 16,500 mark. But in markets, everything and anything is possible. We don't know whether the 16,500 levels would be broken or not. But if it does get breached, then you know whether you are looking out for a small or a big correction. So which means the corrections could aggravate below the 16,500 mark. I hope that this video would probably have filled in some sort of sense of objectivity in the analysis, how we use technical analysis to decipher trends and try and give you a wholesome picture. As I said earlier, that on our earlier Facebook conversations, we have highlighted the significance of the indices going into a reversal much before it actually reversed. And again, today's video is a classical such observation where you need to place significance towards these strong technical parameters. So with that, I request all of you guys, if you've liked the observation, that you do share, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit want to miss out such videos going forward, and you don't want to miss out being the first to observe the trend playing out as we depict on the indices, whether it's a short-term trend, the corrections, the bounces on the indices, or whether the big trends which play out on the indexes. So all what you have to do is you have to join our YouTube channel, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification, the bell button, as well as take some time out and do write comments, whether you agree with the view, whether you disagree, whether you like, whether you dislike. I'm absolutely open with your feedback, because that is what will help us grow and ensure that we come out with classical and such fantastic kind of observations going forward. So I'll wait out for classical comments, feedback, as well as the like and shares from all of you guys. With that, we hope that this bounce which we've started off for the Nifty as well as for the Bank Nifty lasts for much longer duration, and with a painful feeling. Let us hope that this 16,500 mark doesn't get tested on the index, especially on the weekly closing basis on the Nifty 50. With that, bidding you goodbye. Thank you so much. Do ensure that you subscribe to the channel and wait for our next videos. Thank you so much.